Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking on one of history's most complicated, most controversial figures, Grigori Rasputin. Was this guy a holy man, a political puppet master, or was there something else going on entirely?
Our story starts in a place you would never, ever expect. We're not in the glittering palaces of Imperial Russia. Nope, we're in the Soviet Union with a disco beat that, believe it or not, is tied to the whole thing. All right, so picture this. It's 1978. We're deep in the Cold War, and the German disco group Boney M does something that's just unthinkable. They go on this massive tour of the USSR, and they were personally invited by the Soviet leader himself, Leonid Brezhnev.
And this tour was a massive deal. Their huge hit song, Rasputin, was playing everywhere. The Soviet government apparently paid $2 million, a staggering amount of money back then, to get them there. Tickets were cheap, only 4 rubles, but good luck finding one. They were basically impossible to get.
So, while they were there, the band took a little side trip, a pilgrimage really, to Rasputin's last surviving house in his hometown. But this is where the story gets really weird. Right after they left, an order came down from the very top to the KGB. Get rid of that building. And they did. They leveled it, completely wiped it off the map. So you've got to ask yourself, why? Why, over 60 years after he died, was the memory of this one guy, Grigori Rasputin, so threatening that the entire Soviet state had to literally erase his home from existence?
Well, the answer might just be locked away in some top-secret file. Rumor has it the KGB got their hands on a diary, Rasputin's prophecies, and one of them supposedly predicted the total destruction of the godless power, the Soviets. Brezhnev apparently read it, and that's when he ordered the diary to be hidden away and the house demolished.
To really get why this man's ghost was still haunting the Kremlin, we've got to go back to his incredible, almost unbelievable rise from absolutely nowhere to the very center of power. Grigori Rasputin wasn't born into power, not by a long shot. He was just a peasant from a tiny village in Siberia, and he had a bit of a reputation as a troublemaker. But then he has this major spiritual awakening, becomes a wandering holy man, a studitz, and he eventually winds up in St. Petersburg. He completely captivates the city's elite religious circles. And then, in 1905, he gets the introduction of a lifetime to the Tsar himself.
Now you have to understand, the Tsar, Nicholas II, and his wife, the Empress Alexandra, were desperate, absolutely desperate. Their only son, Alexei, the heir to the entire Russian Empire, had hemophilia. Every little scrape, every fall, could trigger a bleeding episode that could kill him, and the best doctors in the world couldn't do a thing about it. And then, in walks Rasputin. And it's just incredible. When little Alexei was in the middle of one of these crises, Rasputin would show up, and just his presence, his prayers, his calm voice. It was like a miracle. The bleeding would stop. We don't know how. Maybe it was hypnotic, maybe it was something else, but he could do what modern medicine couldn't. And that earned him the complete and total trust of the Empress.
But, while he was being treated like a saint inside the palace, the stories being told outside, well, they painted a very, very different picture. And this is the great paradox of Rasputin. To the royal family and his followers, he was this deeply pious man. He didn't eat meat, didn't drink wine, he just healed people. But to everybody else, he was the mad monk, a corrupt, drunken lecher, famous for his wild parties and womanizing. Which one was the real guy? Okay, the most infamous story, the one that really sealed his reputation, supposedly happened at a fancy Moscow restaurant in 1915. The story goes that Rasputin got completely wasted, exposed himself, and created this huge, disgraceful scene. This story was dynamite. It became the ultimate weapon to attack him, and through him, the whole monarchy. But here's the thing. Here's the twist you might not see coming. What if that story, the one that did so much damage, was a total lie? What if the guy in the restaurant wasn't even Rasputin? Because there's actually evidence that on the very night of the supposed scandal, the real Rasputin was on a train hundreds of miles away. The theory is that his enemies hired a lookalike, a political double, to intentionally cause a scene so outrageous that it would completely destroy his reputation and tarnish the Tsar and Empress along with it. And you see, this whole campaign against him, it wasn't just about court gossip. No way. This was tied up in the highest stakes of global politics, the lead-up to World War I.
Rasputin was passionately anti-war. Back in 1912, when the Balkan Wars were threatening to drag Russia into a massive conflict, he apparently got on his knees and begged the Tsar to keep the peace. And it worked. Russia stayed out, which, by the way, infuriated a lot of powerful people in London who really wanted Russia in that fight.
So this anti-war stance basically put a giant target on his back, and it created two very powerful groups of enemies. You had Russian nobles who thought he was a total disgrace and that killing him would be a patriotic act to save Russia's honor. And then you had British intelligence who saw him as a German sympathizer who could convince the Tsar to pull Russia out of World War I altogether.
Now, in the middle of all these plots and conspiracies, Rasputin seemed to know. He could feel his time was running out, and he left behind a prophecy that was just as terrifying as it was accurate.
He wrote this final, chilling letter to the Tsar, and in it he said, "If I'm killed by common people, the throne will stand. But if I am killed by nobles, by your own kind, then know this, not one of your children will live for more than 2 years."
In December of 1916, a group of nobles, led by Prince Felix Yusupov, did exactly that. They lured Rasputin to a palace, and they killed him. The official story is this crazy tale of poison and gunshots and drowning. But it's full of holes. A later autopsy report found something shocking. Rasputin had been shot 3 times by 3 different guns.
Now, Yusupov and another guy admitted to firing 2 of the shots, but that third shot, the fatal one, a clean, professional shot right to the forehead, that came from a .455 Webley revolver. That was not a gun Russian aristocrats carried around. It was the standard-issue sidearm for British officers, and it just so happened to be the personal weapon of an MI6 agent named Oswald Rayner, who was a good friend of the killer, Felix Yusupov.
And after he was murdered by nobles, just as he predicted, his dark prophecy came true with terrifying speed. Just a few months later, the Russian Revolution exploded. In March of 1917, the Tsar gave up the throne, and in July 1918, less than 2 years after Rasputin's murder, the Tsar, the Tsarina, and all 5 of their children were executed.
But, believe it or not, the story still doesn't end there. Even after he's gone, this strange, mystical aura around Rasputin just continues, right up to our own time. I mean, his legacy is just full of bizarre details. His daughter escaped to America and became a circus lion tamer, of all things. His granddaughter actually became close friends with the daughter of the man who murdered him, but the strangest twist of all brings us right back to the beginning. On December 30th, 2010, the 94th anniversary of Rasputin's assassination, to the day, Bobby Farrell, the singer of Boney M., died in his hotel room in St. Petersburg, just a few hundred feet from the very palace where Rasputin was killed. So who was he? Who was the real Grigori Rasputin? Was he a genuine prophet who saw the collapse of an empire coming? Was he a brilliant con man who just took advantage of a desperate family? Or was he, in the end, just a pawn in a much bigger game, silenced by a foreign power to keep Russia in a bloody war? The truth is, we may never know. And that remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries.